and welcome again to this second forum on new normal or no normal. And I have to give credit to my minister, Reverend Peter Friedrichs, who was the first that I heard coined the phrase no normal, which might more accurately speak to what's waiting for us when this pandemic is all over. I want to start off by asking some questions and just kind of getting a sense of where you are in all of this, and then this is an open conversation as we did on the 21st, an opportunity for you to share, ask questions, hear what other congregations are doing, both now during this virtual time, and what plans you may have for reopening and when. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hands electronically. If that's a problem for you, then you can do it the old-fashioned way, and Karen and I will count. Um, Here's the first one. I'm just really curious. How many of you have attended at least one of the first two rounds of sessions in this series on congregational life during the pandemic? How many of you have attended at least one of the previous sessions? I would expect it would be the majority. Oh, I'm surprised. So, well, Emily, you did. Yeah, Kelly, you did. Right? Am I not? Are there some people that aren't able to raise their hand electronically? And keep your hand up if you have. Don't take it down. Okay. So several people, Kelly, Karen, Carol, Michael, you've attended previous sessions, but your hand isn't up. So there's somehow
Yeah,
there's,
I'm on an iPhone and I can't find the
okay.
hand
Well, then go
raising.
like this. Go like
I
this
did,
is
yeah.
only, oh, I'm sorry. I missed you, Michael.
Okay.
The rest of you, Fern, you never attended a previous session? I thought you had. Okay. More people than I thought have not. Okay. I just want to get a sense of how many of you have come back. We did this in May, and then we did the second round in July. And some of you have been with us all the way through. Okay. If you could take your hand down now, because it must be getting tired. And I'll ask you this second question. How many of you are not planning to resume full scale worship services until after the first of the year? Full scale worship services until after the first of the year. Uh,
Can I quibble with your language? By full scale, do you mean
you
in
can
person?
quibble. Yeah, um, Kim, that's a good question. I'm talking about people back in the sanctuary for service, and not everybody may be able to be back by then, but it's open to people who for whom it's safe to come. Okay.
We are virtual full scale.
Right. No, I'm talking about in person. In person. Okay. So Kelly and Cynthia, could the rest of you can put your hands down? Thank you. If you didn't raise your hand, are you planning on having worship services before the end of the year? Or am I misunderstanding?
No, I raised my hand.
Okay.
At the last minute. I'm sorry,
Oh,
Mark.
okay, Kelly.
So, yeah.
So I should have asked it the other way. Is there anyone who is planning to come back and have services before December 31st, 2020? Emily, the Rockland is aiming for fully hybrid, and I got to go back to that. Fully hybrid installation still going on, resume date. Okay. Well, yeah, no. So Emily, what do you mean by hybrid? There going to be some services that are going to be in person?
Correct. We will offer that for those who feel comfortable coming in. The image behind me, you see a little white chalice on a white wall, and that area is going to become a big, huge screen TV for people to see each other back and forth. And the pulpit has already got like a little GoPro. So our installation is in progress.
But there will, before the end of the year, you will have congregants coming into the sanctuary for services.
Possibly. It's just, it's
Oh.
not definite.
Wow, okay. Is there anybody else that is contemplating some in-person services before the end of the year? Okay. How many of you are going to wait until either the UUA says we think it's safe, or there's a safe and effective vaccine? We're not doing anything until we know that it's gone. If that's the case, raise your hand. Okay. 6. Maybe about half of you. So for the rest, yeah, go ahead.
Can I clarify? Are you talking about services or any kind of gathering at
No,
all?
I'm talking about services, Jessica. Well, that's a next question I have about use of the grounds or buildings for other purposes. I'm talking about full-fledged. We are back. There's our minister or our lay leader up front, and there's our DRE, and there's our choir, and we are back. And we're not waiting. We're not going to do that until we know it's absolutely safe. It seems about half of you are. So for those of you, if the questions that I asked weren't appropriate for your answer, could you raise your hand and we'll call on you? And where are you in terms of your plans on going back to in-person services? Ted?
Of course, California, we're guided by the state rules. The state rules vary by county, 58 counties and different colors. And the latest ruling for our county, Marin County, is that we can have 50% capacity back inside, but no more than 100 people, whichever is smaller.
So will Marin follow that? Are you planning on having in-person services for no more than 100 or 50% of capacity?
We have some interest in that. We also have, of course, people saying they're never coming back regardless of what happens. So the technology team has been working, volunteers, to find out how to get a camera on those who are in the sanctuary and have a screen showing those who are home. So we can have a sense of community.
Okay.
That's being worked on, but will be considered probably March or April.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Fern?
Thank you, Mark. I think we are very firmly inclined towards waiting until the UUA and our city make clear recommendations, but I didn't feel I could definitively say that. We've got a group that are actively exploring all kinds of possible situations and options.
Okay. Thank you, Fern. Anyone else that is in kind of an in-between situation? Karen?
Hi, yeah, I mean, I think we're in between right now. We're still discussing. It's going to be some combination of, standardized public health criteria, as well as probably county guidance. Unfortunately, we live in a state where our governor wants to just reopen everything.
Yeah.
Anytime. But yeah, in terms of waiting for a vaccine, I'm not even sure when that's going to happen. So
Right.
I'm sure we want to put a
Okay.
mark there. So yeah, we're in between, but we're getting there.
Got it. Thank you, Karen. Karen Armstrong, I know you put this in the chat, but I'd love to hear your voice.
Our task force that's evaluating was basically going month to month at first. And that got to be, I think, stressful for them and for the congregation. So now they have extended to the end of February, and for sure that we're not opening before then. And then we'll just see what happens in the spring. But there's been no discussion that I know of related to the vaccine. We're a hot spot, so it's a little bit more kind of immediately reactive right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anyone else? Carol Walker.
Sorry. Yeah, we I also belong to what we're calling the continuity committee at the church, and we were board appointed to, figure out things as they went along as far as opening, reopening, et cetera. We basically ran off of Susan Frederick Gray's letter, and we extended it to the end of June 2021. And the reason we extended it a month beyond her May opening was that we figured that way people would know for this full program year, you should plan to be virtual, not only for worship services, but everything else. With the idea that if things, look better sooner, it's better for us to say, well, we can do this in March rather than having to extend month by month or tell people, no, we're not ready. That's one thing. We do have a renter, a school, an independent cooperative school that is renting from us. As a matter of fact, I was just out there today to pick up something, and they are doing most of their work out of doors. What would cause us, we are carefully monitoring what our county says, what the state of Maryland says, and to the extent they're believable CDC guidelines. And so right now what we have is virtual worship services, although from time to time our pianist goes to plays the piano in the building, although he has one at home. Our minister sometimes comes to the building to do her part of the worship, but we have been, for the most part, working it out virtually. We just passed a policy of under what circumstances we could sponsor PBUC events, and basically they're very, very limited. The one thing that we did that I think was controversial is that in spite of our committee's recommendation, the board decided that a PBUC event that was in somebody's home was not covered. We had no legal liability for that, which I'm not sure. Well, I know for a fact that the 4 or 5 members of the committee don't agree with that, but that was sort of an accommodation for our annual auction, which is our second biggest source of revenue next to pledges. So that's where we are.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. I know several of you have your hands up, and I'll get to you. A couple of comments though in response to what Carol said. When this whole thing started and we did our first forum, a lot of congregations were saying, well, we're not going to open until September, or we're going to open in November, and I think we've all learned now that we're not setting a specific date in our congregations because we just don't know. And then we have to say to people, well, we're going to push it back. And I think that's one lesson that we've all learned. I also, Carol started talking about people in the building, and I just want to talk for now about worship services. And my next question was going to be, how many are using the grounds or building, at least partially? So I want to hold off on that question until we've talked about worship services. So Carol Wilsey, I know you put it on the chat, but can you just unmute and share? And Robbie, you'll go next.
Yeah, we've just felt like what we needed to say is that we are reevaluating, but we are closed indefinitely. Yeah. And that's for services and everything else, except for some staff work here at the building.
Yeah. Again, you don't want to raise people's expectations and then disappoint people. Robbie.
Exactly what Carol Wilsey just said. Oh. We're closed indefinitely. We're following the UA guidelines and have not missed a live stream service since March 15th.
Okay. Thanks, Robbie. Sarah?
Well, we just decided yesterday in our meeting that we're going to go with the World Health Organization numbers for what is safe and what is not safe. So I can't imagine that we would be open before June. Looking at our statistics here in Peoria and then looking at the recommendations for what is safe.
Okay. And that's the recommendation of the World Health Organization,
yes.
Which we know is a hoax and a bogus organization, right? Anyway, thank you, Sarah. Lori, and then Connie.
I think, Mark, are you going to be going through ours? So I'll pass on that.
Okay, yeah, I will, Lori, in just a little bit, and then ask you to kind of augment some stuff that I might have left out. Connie?
Well, our situation is just a little different because we're taking advantage of the shutdown of the building to do a major remodel, which had been planned. And so we're actually grateful we're not having to scramble to rent space for services during that time, which is what we had originally thought we would have to do. And so it's like the ill wind that blew no good for us.
Yeah.
But now that we're online, we figure we're going to probably always continue with some kind of hybrid.
Yeah, I think most, if not all, congregations are going to do that. We've discovered that that's a very viable way of reaching people, and it'll be interesting to see down the road how many people prefer to stay at home in their pajamas and watch it virtually, and how many want to be there physically with other people. Thank you, Connie. For those of you that have your hands up, could you lower your hand so that I want to make sure I'm not ignoring you? Okay, thank you. Raise your hand if you are using the grounds and or the building, at least partially. Like, now I know many congregations, the minister, maybe the DRE, the pianist are now broadcasting from the sanctuary. That's the case with our congregation. But are any congregations having small groups meeting in the building? So let's see. Emily, let me start with you, and then Ted, I'm going to ask you to chime in next.
Okay, we just had a long-term, very respectful, very small rental group request to resume meeting inside our building. They had been meeting outside. And this is weather related. And so we honored that request. We know we've dealt with them for many years. We believe we can trust them to follow hygiene and sanitary standards. I and our administrator went through the building with the contact and told him what was expected, and we feel comfortable with it. Not only did he sign a contract, but he also signed a COVID waiver. And what we asked, because this is an extremely confidential group, we asked that when they sign in, we do have a sign-in sheet, that he initial and then say how many people were there. And he has done that. I was there this morning. He has done that. And they also are supposed to keep their own contact tracing list, plus contact us if anybody does get sick. And we do feel comfortable with that at this time. Other than that, there's really no gathering going on other than people wandering in to continue our upgrades.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Ted?
About 25% of our budget comes from rentals, and we've had great indication that they want to come back. We've allowed that, the state law allows that now. So we have had a couple come back. We've had the minister occasionally using the sanctuary for services. We've had a memorial service with 20, 25 people attending, so socially distanced. We've done the geometry to figure out how to social distance couples and individuals. There's one-way markings on the building, hallways, so people have to go, particular patterns. So it's pretty easy to do, and we'll slowly be getting back those renters.
Okay. Have you gotten, really quickly, Ted, have you gotten any pushback from the congregation who may be saying, well, how come they can use the building and we can't?
No, the county rules allow small groups to meet. We've adopted the protocols for doing that. So the committees can meet there if they choose. A lot of it, we can still meet outside here in California. So a lot of meetings take outside in the courtyard, socially distanced. People are just to being socially distanced and masked and that kind of thing. So there's no pushback for that at all.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ted. Beverly?
So we have a small daycare that takes purchase of care children. And when our state and town said that, daycares could open again with certain percentage, we allowed them to come back. And they have a whole list of cleaning protocols, and they stay in one locked part of the building. Just in the last 2 weeks, when again, the city of Newark said that you could have 10 people inside, 20 people outside, I wrote, we're a small congregation. We only have 128 people. So I wrote the policies for COVID policies for if small groups wanted to meet inside, if 20 people wanted to have an event in the parking lot. And in those, both cleaning protocols and written protocols was everybody has to sign in. If it's somebody that we don't know, they have to put their full contact information in case contact tracing was needed at some point. But at this point, we've had 1 or 2 committees meet, and we have a part-time administrator, and she started back in July. So that's where we are.
Thank you, Beverly.
Mark, can I ask Beverly just a question? I just want to confirm, did you say 20 people outside?
Yes, that's what the state of Delaware and the city of Newark says we're allowed to have.
Yeah, I'm going to share my PowerPoint in just a few minutes. The criteria is so varied, and Newark is 45 minutes away from where we are, and it's just the criteria is just so different across states and counties and municipalities. And
exactly, because I'll say sometimes something about the state of Delaware, and I have one member who probably never will come back and will always have to have hybrid. And he's like, but we have to do it the town in Newark. Yes, I looked at the town in Newark.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, Fern, and then Lori.
So we actually have used the outside for our vigil. We've been running a weekly Black Lives Matter vigil for 6 years now and felt it was critical to continue. So we were able to adapt it to the city's numbers. But we're now at that point. Last night, it was really cold and wet to be sitting to hold the quiet meditative portion of our vigil outside. So we're trying to rethink how that will happen. In addition, the Buildings and Grounds Committee does go in the building. There's a group of 3 people. We had planned, and I think it will eventually start within a month or 2, renovating a bathroom to add a shower. So we're sort of in this in-between kind of space. And I feel it's time for us to clearly create policy.
Yeah, which I want to show you what our congregation has done, at least partially, and then after that, and ask folks to share what if you've developed plans yet or not. So thank you, Fern. Lori?
So our group is allowing small 10 or fewer folks to meet outside. And we're in the process of looking at allowing them to come inside, depending on the size of the room. On the main floor from 7, 10, I think the largest group would be 15, but we have not implemented that. We have a number of factors we look for when we open that up, but we're preparing for that as a next step because the weather is getting pretty cold.
Yeah. Thank you, Lori. Sarah.
Well, our church has traditionally been used as a polling place, so we are allowing the city to use it again as a polling place this year.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's see, Kelly, and then Jessica, and then Cynthia.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. So yes, so just like I think it was Ted, 25% of our income is from one of our longtime renters, which is another church. They do meet on Saturdays. That's when they have their service. Right now, of course, we're not having service. Our church is not having service, and so there's no overlap. We do feel that they are following CDC guidelines and social distancing protocols. They actually submitted some documentation, and it's been approved by our board. So that's working for us. And but for outside, Karen and I are on the task force, but we're also on the board. And so for outside, what we did research and we couldn't find a number that said anything below or above 20 or 30 was worse or not worse, however you want to say that. But so currently right now we are approving events on the outside, but they're all very subjective. They're all very different. And we don't have a cap on how many participants. And that personally, that kind of concerns me, but we did the research and we couldn't find anything from the CDC or from the UUA. So,
well, the UUA is saying they're recommending that no one go in the building.
No, I'm talking outside, Mark.
Oh, outside. I'm sorry. That's right. Yeah. Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Jessica?
So from the very beginning, we closed the building except to an AA group that rented the building. And I think the decision was made that that was really important to them and they met in the building. But it's also been used as the office. People, one person goes in every day. Usually she's the only one in there, but some people have used their offices, which I'll close, have closed doors. And I have started going in once a week. We have a very large preschool that rents the building and they started back over the summer. You know, very carefully, but that has been going on and still is going on. The members are very eager to get their small groups back in person, but our Coping with COVID committee has determined that that's just not where it's safe to go with the age of our congregation. We are moving to outdoor meetings and there is a cap. I can't remember if it's 15 or 20, but there is a cap. We have different areas that are identified that people can sign up for and use. We have a porta potty because the ventilation system in the church is not good in those rooms. And I don't know, you know, the weather really is turning here. So I don't know. I think that people are talking about leaving some fire pits out for some, but that's where we are.
Thank you, Jessica. Cynthia, and then I just want to show you this PowerPoint real quick because it might address some of the questions that some of you have been asking. Cynthia.
Okay, I'm in the same church as Fern, and she just talked about our vigil that's been going on for years, every Thursday, no matter what, rain, shine, sleet, or snow. But usually after that, you could go inside, and now you can't. We did have in the beginning of October a benefit for a jazz group here in Philadelphia called Jazz Bridge, and the musicians were in the church. Most of what I could see, they were very social distance, but they performed. It was a Zoom event for anybody who wanted to see it. But we're hoping that we get some more ventilation and we can do more small groups like that. Philadelphia has a different protocol than the other counties because we're denser and we've had some, it changes every day. It's like you can have 25 people, now you can only have 50 people, you can have 10%. So it happens weekly or even daily. So I am on that reopening task force along with Fern, and we're working on it.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. Let me just take a few moments to share what my congregation is doing, and you can see all of the information at uucdc.org, and then click on the tab Connecting During COVID-19. I'm just giving you the Cliff Notes version, but you can get all of the information on our website. We started meeting in June. Lori Cook, who's on this call, is a member of the task force as well. There were 10 members, including our minister, and we represented a cross section of the congregation. This was the criteria that we used after a lot of conversation. Outdoor meetings of 10 or fewer participants would be permitted only if the weekly average percentage of test positivity in our county, Delaware County, was less than 9%. And this is based on 2 or 3 different measures. Indoor meetings would be permitted only if the weekly average was less than 5%. So we held the indoor meetings to a much more stringent criteria. The number of participants, as Laurie said, allowed was based on where they were in the building. So and that was based on having people at least 6 feet apart. So our sanctuary could have no more than 15 participants. Our fellowship hall, which is smaller, no more than 10. And our McLennan room, which is our largest conference room, could have no more than 7 participants. We created a meeting covenant for people who would either use our grounds or the building, that they needed to be familiar with and follow the guidance that provided for in-person gatherings. People could only attend if they were healthy, and we were on the honor system, maintain social distancing, wear a mask, not attend if they've had recent contact with someone who is ill, agree to cooperate with public health protocols and regarding hygiene, and respect individuals' desire for confidentiality in reference to personal health topics, should they come up during the meetings. This is just a partial list of the requirements for holding an outdoor meeting. Participants could not enter the church building. They had to bring their own chairs or other seating and any personal supplies. No one could share materials. Seating was arranged to allow no less than 6 feet apart, and participants had to wear masks at all times, refrain from singing or other activities that could increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19. And again, all of this is outlined on the website. This is a picture of what we created in our drop-off area in front of our church. There were 3 lines there: white, red, and yellow with X's. And so that would correspond to the number of people attending, and the X's are 6 feet apart. Interestingly, we opened this up about at least a month ago, Lori, I think. We had no requests for an outdoor meeting, and that was during a period when the weather was still relatively mild. So we found that to be interesting. We thought people were chomping at the bit to get back on the grounds. For indoor meetings, participants in our building could not enter the basement or the lower section. Only the upstairs restroom could be used. And then we had a whole protocol of wiping down chairs, hard surface chairs, soft surface chairs. Windows and doors should be open for ventilation, but no fan use. And then after the meeting, the leader of the group leader of the meeting was responsible for making sure that all of these things were wiped down. So these were pretty stringent requirements for holding both outdoor and indoor meetings in particular. We've developed 3 forms that needed to be filled out both for outdoor and indoor meetings. The request for a meeting form, a pre-meeting medical form, which all participants had to complete and send back, and then a post-meeting form to give feedback to leadership and staff on how the meeting went. We also had a second subgroup that was charged with enhancing the current virtual experience during the pandemic, and they identified 3 major areas that we need to work on: congregational care and pastoral care. And Lori has taken the initiative and created a Stay Connected program where members of the congregation make phone calls to other members of the congregation to check in with them. We saw a need to enhance the AV capabilities in our sanctuary and enhance our social media presence and our website. And those are things that we are currently working on right now. We're not waiting for the pandemic to end to move on these things. And then finally, the third subgroup, which Lori and I were both on, was responsible for imagining a congregation post-pandemic. And this is where we came up with a real aspirational document. And we really had a lot of fun creating this. We imagined a speech by the president of the board at a meeting on November 1st, 2026. So looking back 5 years hence at what the congregation did and where we were in 2026. And the complete text is on the website, but these are just some of the highlights. We took the best of who we were pre-COVID and combined it with what we learned during the pandemic. We committed to act in ways that brought new meaning to our mission and vision and our way of being together. We really see this as an opportunity to create a new congregation, a new way of being together. We moved to a hybrid form of worship that had both a strong virtual service and an in-person component, as many of your congregations will be doing. We recognize the need for improved technology, both in the sanctuary and throughout the building. We became a one-size-does-not-fit-all congregation where nothing was off limits in ways of living out our faith. We took a more active role in helping to change the system by creating a greater presence outside the walls of our congregation. We want to be a congregation not only in the community, but of the community. Again, this is looking back 5 years hence. We took concrete actions to actualize our adoption, which we did last year, of the 8th principle, and hired an associate minister to oversee social justice work and affecting real change in the community. We initiated worship services that were truly multi-generational and increased opportunities for members of all ages to share conversation and practices that deepened our commitment to our faith. So we're imagining a whole new religious education program that involves people of all ages. We increased the number of UU 101, which is our program for people who want to become members, by utilizing online videos and in-person meetings. And Reverend Peter and I did the first of those a few weeks ago, where we had 2 prepared videos and 2 virtual meetings. And we'll probably continue that process when we go back to the new normal. And with patience and perseverance, we encourage the congregation to try new things, knowing that if they did not work, we would try something else. So that's our aspirational statement. And that's what we hope will guide us as we begin to move forward once this pandemic is in the rearview mirror. So thanks for the opportunity to share that. Lori, anything that you want to augment or?
A couple of the things we did is we are hiring, hopefully we'll make an offer next week to a social media person. So someone that will up our communication. So while our community is distributed, it's much easier to get out of touch with what's going on and to not feel connected. So that person will really ramp that up and prepare us for some of those aspirational things we wanted to do in our community. And the second is we have a whole series of programs that we want to do to keep people connected. So some of them are virtual and some of them at some point will be hybrid, et cetera. An example of one that we did for the kids is they brought in their stuffed animals, dropped them off, and they had a sleepover. And they did that on a Saturday night, and adults sent in their stuffed animals. And on the Sunday, during the Sunday service, there were some photos about what they got up to and the little stuffed animals in the sanctuary and doing things. And it helped people to see that, you know, the church is still there. We might not be there, but their stuffed animals got to be. So we're getting very creative.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Larry. So you can see, at least in our congregation, we're not saying when we're going to be all back together. We just don't know. But we're also not sitting on our hands. We're imagining a congregation and what it will be like, and we're starting to do some of that planning now. And we're willing now, under very stringent conditions, to begin moving into the building in small groups, which was really a change of attitude from just a few months ago, when we thought we're going to bar the doors and no one's getting in there until everybody can go in. So our thinking is evolving, but it's safety first. And that still remains the motto for us. So what I'm wondering, and I do want to say that we're approaching 2:00. And if some of you need to leave because you did commit an hour, well, thank you for coming. If you can stay a little longer, we'll keep the conversation going for another 20-30 minutes at the most. So I want to give you that opportunity. Thank you, Lori. Do any of you have similar plans, or or plans that you're working on now end for when you begin to reopen, whenever that may be? Michael's your hand. Okay, Michael, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, that the ending aspirational message is exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you, because we are stuck here where you were a few months ago at, putting the entire building and the entire congregation into a big Ziploc bag and sticking it in the freezer. It was what it feels like to me at this point, where the voices of fear are kind of the loudest and the most dominating. That message in and of itself has just kind of sparked me, and it's a message that needs to be shared amongst ourselves. And it's a process, right? We ebb and we flow and we come and we go, and thank you so much for that, because that, I think, will serve us well as a beginning conversation for where we go next.
Thank you, Michael, for saying that. Beverly, I want to call on you in a second. I just want to answer Ted's question. The slides that you just saw are on this recording, Ted. And the recording will be available both on my website and on the UUM website. And I'll send you folks an email when they're both available to view. Beverly?
So I'm really happy that you shared those slides. You're a lot further along in your thinking, but we're a pretty aged congregation, and our board has taken some time to start thinking about how do we want to be when we reopen, and it's given us the time to do that. We have a major project that we need to do on our ceiling and hopefully incorporate our sound system. We're having trouble getting people to come to do that assessment. So I hope it'll get going pretty soon. But I keep bringing up to them, and this is going to give me some good ideas. What do we want to do when we're back? Do we want to stay just the way we were? What do we want to change? What do we want to see differently? I mean, we only have a part-time minister because, as I said, we're such a small congregation. And so much of the congregation has aged at this point. We have such a small number of kids now. Some of these ideas were really great too. So we're doing a lot of talking. We need to do some more making some decisions here at some point and writing some things like you have, but this spurs me to do that.
Thank you, Beverly. Before we hear from Kelly, Karen Armstrong, and is there anything on the chat that we missed?
No, I think most of it's been folks who had to leave, though I will say that Cynthia also had her hand up. I think that's new, not an old hand up, right, Cynthia?
Okay.
Yeah.
So Kelly and then Cynthia. Thanks, Karen.
So Mark, I just have a question to the group, and that is what we've decided to do is when we do decide to reopen is to only possibly allow 40 members back into the building. And we did that based on the measurements and 6 feet apart. And we went in and kind of did some calculations. So we said, okay, 40 people would be safe, for service. And of course, we're going to do the hybrid virtual service as well. But my question to the group is how do we manage or handle the children? So if we have children that come in and they're in the service and they count as that 40, and then when we sing them out to go into the RE building, and that probably is going to leave, I'm thinking 10 to 15, maybe 10 to 15 seats, let's just say, because we have a lot of kids. So how are you managing that? I mean, are you having another service for the kids and that they don't come into the main sanctuary because there's limited seating? Do they go into the RE building and start there? We were just kind of trying to come up with some conclusion or just some options.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, I'll invite anyone to respond to that before we hear from Cynthia. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if there's any congregation that has thought that through yet. I know we haven't. We haven't even thought about kids in the building because we're not, other than the numbers that I just shared, we're not talking about having adults in the building.
Well, this obviously when we decide that, this is a plan or just something that we want to think about when we send our,
Yeah.
when we send this information to the board for them to approve. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just say, it's a myth now that children are less vulnerable to COVID. I read recently that up to 10% of all positive COVID cases affect children now. So I guess if we're faced with that situation, or when we are, I would think we would apply the same safety standards, at least in terms of social distancing and mask wearing.
Yeah, but I think my question is that at some point the children are called out of the sanctuary into their own space.
Right.
And by doing that, that's going to allow 10 seats available that could have been taken by 10 other people. But because we're only allowing 40 people in the service, and then 10 get called out to go to the RE building for service, there's 10 seats open.
Yeah,
So,
no, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Well, it's warm in Florida. Let them wait outside. Kim.
Right. So I think that those are two different kinds of questions.
Okay.
I think as a technical matter, the 10 kids count towards your number. And if after they leave, you have less than capacity, that's fine. You just don't want to have more than capacity. But I also think it sounds like what you're talking about is the opportunity for us to be rethinking how we do worship and how we do religious education and how we do worship with children. And that feels like the bigger question for you all to be thinking about. Do you want a multi-generational service? Do you want more robust worship with your youth? What does your RE look like next year?
Okay, Kimberly, that was great. I'm going to try to write that down now. Thank you. So you said we could possibly consider more of a multi-generational service and or a very robust RE service for the kids. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you,
Kelly. Thank you, Kim. I just want to say real quick, Cynthia, one in our aspirational document, we're imagining multi-generational services and followed by the opportunity for people of all ages to engage in activities that where people across generations can share our faith. So we're even beginning to imagine maybe fewer RE classrooms for children and more larger space opportunities for people of all ages to engage in activities. It's part of our dream. Cynthia, thanks for waiting.
Yes, I think I forgot everything, but I do want to thank you for that 2026 reflection or projection or whatever it is back and forth. That was interesting. I was thinking of how old I'll be in 2026. And as far as the children are concerned, we were planning pre-COVID to do all sorts of trips and things with kids, and a lot of that's been curtailed. But we're hoping, we have a small congregation and even smaller group of children, but we're hoping to continue that in the future. And we're looking for any protocol that everybody else has that they can share.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate being here today, seeing all your lovely faces. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Cynthia. Kim?
So I'm thinking more about the children because this is the stuff that I get more excited about. Because I think maybe what I'm hearing, and your question also is about capacity, right? So if you have 70 people who want to worship and you have enough to have 2 services, maybe what that looks like are 2 really different kinds of services. One that is more interesting for youth and one that's not. So maybe you're not sending youth off to RE. Maybe all of your services are multi-generational. But because now you need to have 2 services to meet your capacity, you can make those services look really different and be really experimental about what your worship looks like.
Yeah. Kim, it sounds like you would have made a great addition to our subgroup, coming up with these ideas. We just really thought, and we were really inspired by our minister, this is the time now when we're kind of shut down to start dreaming. Do we want to go back to the way it was before? Or do we want to imagine a whole different experience for our congregation? Any other comments or questions or reflections on anything that we've talked about today, or any questions that we've asked? We okay? We good? So Karen and I want to, oh, go ahead, Ted.
Just to comment, I think all businesses and nonprofits and churches are realizing that a lot of people want to stay home. They don't want to come back. And so the big change is going to be that the churches that have not invested in the technology to Zoom things to people at home are going to have to make that investment. And we're going to have, from now on, businesses and churches are going to have to accommodate people who will be home, kids in school, all kinds of institutions are going to have to change to allow half the group to be at home and half the group to be present. So the hybrid model, I think, is going to be prevalent for a long time to come throughout not only churches, but businesses as well.
Yeah, I agree, Ted. The world is going to look a lot different than it was before this all started. Karen.
Yes, as a membership person, I think that's really exciting too. And the first thing I thought of when Ted started talking is our young adults who go off to college, and the ability to kind of keep them in our embrace if they want to be there with these virtual offerings. So just rethinking what membership looks like, how we define it, how we reach out to members. That's kind of some of the stuff we're talking about at UUAMP that is kind of fun to look forward to, those kinds of things to keep our denomination, our faith relevant.
That's a great point, Karen. This could be a way that we can hold on to those high school grads that go off to college and forget about Unitarian Universalism. Our program for new prospective members that I mentioned in the PowerPoint, we had 10 people in our first virtual series. 2 sessions were recorded and 2 were Zoom meetings, and 8 out of 10 people signed a membership book afterwards, which was a higher percentage than we got when we were in person. So I don't know what the cause and effect is, but it certainly didn't serve as a deterrent for people to virtually sign the membership book. So we're imagining all sorts of ways related to membership as well. Michael?
A question. How are you signing the membership book in this time? Do you have a form or a request, or because we actually had that happen where somebody wanted to join, but how are you doing signing the membership book virtually?
We have like a really extremely spiritual, sexy looking Google form. Actually, there's nothing spiritual or sexy about it. It's a Google form that we send to folks, and they just fill it out, and they just kind of there isn't even a space for a signature, but by completing the form and sending it back, they're indicating their willingness to become a member. And then at some point we'll probably have a virtual recognition ceremony for them, and when we're in person again, they can literally sign the book. Karen, did you add something? Karen Armstrong?
Yes, there's some conversation in the chat. Carol said that she's adding the names to the book, and then there may be a session. And I was going to respond to that I actually photocopied our book, like where the next line was. And so I'm sending that to people and they can sign it, and then we'll do something. We come back together, and it's more of a symbol than anything else.
Yeah.
But the ignorant forms, same, Mark. Ours aren't sexy either, but they exist.
Right. Beverly, I'm going to give you the last word.
I just remembered that I wanted to say, since a lot of us have said we have older congregations, we had one member who went to training on how to do Zoom, and then she offers that training. She'll actually go to someone's house to train them if they're afraid to use their computer so that they can get on Zoom and be part of our services.
That's great. And I did notice the Central East region here in this section of the country had an online either webinar or link, kind of a tutorial on how to do Zoom meetings. So that's great. Thank you, Beverly. Karen, any last minute chats and any last words from you?
This is interesting from Emily. They had a return e-join that grew up in the congregation, and we've had that too. Our last two newest members are people who've moved away and then have re-signed the book because they know that they can.
Yeah.
So there's just some really good membership stuff in there. And I'll just put in the plug for UUAMP that we do have programming. You can find it on our website that is open right now. We've just kind of thrown the doors open a lot. We have some things just for members, but we really are just kind of widening our embrace a little bit. And so this wonderful program and lots of others that are happening between now and the end of the year. And then we're going to probably be pretty program heavy for this sort of specific stuff after the first of the year when we can all catch our breath.
Sounds great. Anything else, Karen, before we adjourn that you'd like to share? No, from you, Karen, not from the chat.
Oh, from me? No.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, for being part of this forum. Again, we'll send you an email when both links are up. And Karen and I are going to chat and see, maybe we'll run another series in the next couple of months and see where people are. But thank you all so much for your time, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, Mark. This was very helpful.
Thank you.